Hi, this is week one for the advanced class. We are arguing opponents of the NCAA regulating new NIL changes. So before we even get started, let's do some housekeeping stuff here. First of all, the NCAA is the National Collegiate Athletic Association. Secondly, NIL refers to name, image, and likeness. What does that mean? That's your brand. That is who you represent yourself to be on social media, in a conversation. For example, Mary Hensel is the name I put on The Right Way. They associate my business with my name, my image, my likeness. Okay. So prior to June 30th, 2021, student athletes, those who were given scholarships to play a sport, any sport, male or female, for any college, small or big, could not profit off their name, image, and likeness. And the reason was twofold here. Number one, student athletes were considered amateurs. They weren't considered professionals, so they didn't feel like it was appropriate to pay them. Especially when you're 18, 19, and 20, you're still learning. So you're a student athlete, so you had that description. And secondly, you're under scholarship. You're already given a free ride. You are given 4 years of free education, more if you can finagle it better. What does that mean? That means rent, room, board, you have a place to stay, tuition, books, 3 meals a day. Not to mention, uniforms, any other privileges, especially if you're football or basketball, men's football or basketball, you get a lot of privileges, hotels where you stay, accommodations. So the NCAA really felt that student athletes were already given, basically they were being paid. However, you have the opposing side who is in favor of student athletes maintaining their NIL rights. Okay, so a lot of things have happened in the last 2 years. I think the best way to kind of introduce this, for those of you, this is your first time, it is overwhelming, everybody. So let me get my article here real quick. Okay, get my video. Here we go.
Always brought up this exact issue.
Okay, so I'm going to apologize for that for a second. I should have set it up, but I just completely forgot. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so this is the video I played for classes. It is 20 minutes long. I didn't play 20 minutes by any means, but I do think it kind of explains it in a way that's kind of fun. And if you're not familiar with college sports, it kind of gives you a little insight. Here we go.
College athletes should be classified as unpaid amateurs. Barring those who compete and profit off the fame. Fast forward to 2021, and college athletes are still not getting paid to play. But for the first time in history, they can make money off their name, image, and likeness. And they're using social media to build their personal brand and businesses off the courts and outside of the lines. With some of today's top athletes garnering $1 million endorsement deals, with the new rules, even the playing field are destroying college sports. And will the NCAA ever pay athletes a share of its billions in revenue? In this film, we'll talk to some of today's top athletes, agents, schools, lawmakers, and leaders in tech to take you through the story of NIL, how it started, where it is now, and where it could be heading in the future.
NIL is an acronym for name,
image, likeness.
College athletes are now able to leverage their brands and who they are in order to make money. It allows them to really start building their brand away from the sport that they play at a younger age.
Today's student athletes are earning at the high level 7 figures through endorsements and NIL monetization.
They can also go after third parties who use their name, image, and likeness without their permission.
And intellectual property, that's a term of art that most college students may never have heard until NIL came about.
Name, image, likeness, or NIL for short, will go down for me as a sports industry professional as well as a fan, one of the most significant things that's ever happened in the history of college sports.
Our first stop on this journey was to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to speak with Darren Heitner, legal advisor to some of today's top earning NIL athletes. He explained how the NCAA came under increased pressure to change the rules on NIL, from changes in state laws giving students the right to payment to landmark Supreme Court rulings.
Having a unanimous decision in favor of Alston in 2021 against the NCAA is vitally important for where we are today with name, image, and likeness. It basically called the NCAA a cartel, that it was in collusion in order to prevent athletes from a certain type of benefit, that being academic-related benefits. And Justice Kavanaugh went a step further in his concurring opinion to say that maybe all restrictions should be shot down. And ultimately, the NCAA on June 30th, 2021, finally changed its regulations on this subject, implemented what it's called an interim NIL policy. And that's why, as of today, you see college athletes around the country finally enjoying these rights.
So why would the NCAA forbid its athletes from earning money in the first place? For that answer, let's start from the beginning. On November 6, 1869, Rutgers and Princeton played what is known as the first college football game ever. But by the early 1900s, football had gotten so dangerous that there were public outcries to ban the sport completely. And players not even enrolled in school often filled out the rosters. So in 1905, U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt called together colleges from across the country in a last-ditch effort to clean up the sport. And in 1910, this group became known as the NCAA.
Notice they're all men.
The newly established NCAA's mission was to regulate the rules, protect young athletes, and establish amateurism as a foundation for all of college sports. But it wasn't until a quarter of a century later, in 1936, that athletes were allowed to receive academic scholarships to help offset the cost of attendance.
Athletic ability should receive consideration in determining student values and in the assignment of scholarships, loans, and opportunities for remunerated work.
Thus, with the Southeastern Conference's forthright action, college football becomes openly subsidized.
Subsidized.
The NCAA classifies itself as a nonprofit organization, but it generates revenues in excess of $14 billion annually, a number that has more than tripled over the last 20 years and rivals professional sports around the world. But despite all the marketing and TV deals, ticket sales, and merchandise sales, college athletes still aren't paid a share of the revenue. This has been a source of much controversy over the years. In fact, over 80 years ago, in 1936, MIT professor George Owens brought up this exact issue.
If it is necessary for a boy to undergo extreme risks of living his life, why not reimburse him in a substantial and regular business manner? Why shouldn't the players share in the profits of the game?
Their reasoning for not paying athletes directly? Amateurism.
We need to safeguard the non-employment status of student athletes to maintain the core principles of collegiate athletics.
The colleges don't want anything to change because the largely white men who are making the $1 million salaries who are putting the product on the field. That's a civil rights issue. That's an economic rights issue, and it needs to change.
Not
Okay, so we've got a pretty good argument there already. So let me, you should have the document. So I kind of have these from class. So in 1869, the NCAA, the National Collegiate Athletic Association, make sure you're writing out acronyms. Don't assume they know what you're talking about. You know, when I was going through these articles, there was some UBH. I was like, what is UBH? They never told me. I didn't know what it was. So make sure you are doing that. That's, that's standard MLA format. So the NCAA required student athletes to maintain an amateur status and disallowed any form of profiting from their success. Okay, so today's side, we're going to argue. Once student athletes were given the green light to manage their NIL, their name, image, and likeness, they could finally take advantage of business deals, capitalizing on their collegiate success without penalty. Okay, so let's talk about that. Prior to June 30th, 2021, when the Supreme Court, in a case NCAA versus Alston, had a unanimous agreement, and they found the NCAA, quote, Supreme Court ruling, was not legally allowed to limit any education-related payments to students. So prior to 2021, student athletes were actually held to a different standard than every other college student on campus. What do I mean by that? Okay, because you were a student athlete and you were on scholarship, you were beholden to the NCAA, who enforced you could not profit, you could not make money, you could not, for example, you can't appear in an ad campaign, you couldn't sell ads on your social media account, you couldn't sell merchandise, you couldn't start your own sports camp, you couldn't start your own business. You could not sell signed memorabilia. You couldn't make paid appearances. You couldn't deliver speeches for money. You couldn't arrange autograph signings, which today they can. Well, why? Why did the NCAA want to restrict them? It's really about the bottom line. They wanted to make money off of the players, and they did. Let me give you a prime example. Former Texas A&M Heisman Trophy winner in 2012, Johnny Manziel, achieved overnight fame. When Texas A&M beat Alabama, number one ranked team at the time, his fame skyrocketed. He was on every talk show. I mean, he was huge. He was the first freshman to win the Heisman Trophy. Today, he would have made hundreds of millions of dollars. So there's just a standing joke at Texas A&M, from Johnny Manziel himself, that they have a brand new stadium because of him. And they were able to recruit other athletes because of him. They were able to sell more tickets because of him. He made zero off of that. So when the Supreme Court made this decision in 2021, it was a game changer in college sports. Let me be clear. And we always have to look at both sides of an issue. The concern was if they allowed players to profit off their NIL, that it would ruin collegiate sports. So we're 2 years in, right? Critics feared that it would really promote pay for play, that it would create this wild, wild west landscape. And the truth is it has. The truth is both sides have a point, which is why we are in this class. We look at both sides. So what is the NCAA doing now? Well, they lost. The Supreme Court overruled them. So now they are in a position where it's 2 years in. And by the way, there's a lot that's gone wrong. Everything they predicted, pay for play, is happening. Poor student athletes are getting taken advantage of by businesses. Check, it's happening. So the NCAA wants a new federal regulation put in place. They want new laws put into place, restrictions and limitations of NIL. So we're going to argue today, no. It will work itself out, that the system will work itself out. So what happened since 2021 is the NCAA put in an interim policy. An interim, if you look up the definition, is temporary. They lost a Supreme Court ruling and they didn't have the wherewithal to put a backup in place. And I really don't think they thought they were going to lose, but they did. So what they allowed was colleges and states to create their own NIL rules. Well, you can imagine, we got 50 states. And if they're all deciding they have their own agenda and their own rules, of course we don't have uniformity. And of course we're going to have universities that are going to try to take advantage of loopholes. And that's absolutely happened. But what we're going to argue for today is that student athletes should maintain the right to continue to profit from their name, image, and likeness without the NCAA stepping in as an enforcer, attempting to implement restrictions to circumvent the gains they've already made. And let me be clear, gains were made. Before the new NIL changes were allowed, student athletes were held to a different standard to regular students on campus. And I kind of already talked about that. So I want you to kind of go through here, and I want to make sure that you know what NIL is. College football has been a strictly amateur sport since 1869. Officially, it still is. But for the first time since June 30th, 2021, players on the field are permitted to legally put money in their pockets. NCAA athletes can now make money in business adventures without losing their eligibility after state laws and NCAA changes have erased rules that kept athletes from earning income while in college. Now players can sell the rights to their name, image, and likeness. Okay, what does it mean? The ability to profit off their brand. The new NIL rule changes overturn that precedent that student athletes could not sell their likeness because they were on scholarship. Now, there are two rules that are still maintained in place. Two NCAA rules, despite NIL changes. Schools cannot pay a player to sign for an athletic program. So what does that mean? It means if you have a top recruit in high school, let's say, I don't know, Fred Jones, just a hypothetical name, and he plays football. UT Austin cannot give him an NIL deal, save $10 million to recruit him to sign for the school. That would be pay for play. And I'm not going to lie, that's happening. Yeah. And the other thing the NCAA forbids is quid pro quo. You cannot expect something in return from a player and then reward them. So for example, Fred Jones plays well. If you play well, we'll make sure you get another NIL deal for $10 million, quid pro quo, right? But only if you play well. Players aren't supposed to get any compensation tied to performance, period. And recruits cannot sign any NIL deal contingent on playing at any particular school. Not going to lie. In the last 2 years, that is happening. It is crazy, crazy. Schools are taking advantage of this, opportunity. So the NCAA is fighting back. So, they're like, look, we're still the head body, the governing body of collegiate athletics. We're going to come in here and do what we can. So I'm not going to tell you that they're not out there looking, because they're looking. A collective is a company, usually a wealthy alumni. They should not be associated with the school. They should not profit from the athlete being signed to that school. But they help facilitate, they're like the middleman, like Fred Jones. Here's your, Nike, we're going to put you guys together. So they're just the middleman. So you are not allowed as a collegiate coach, as a collegiate administration on any college campus to help facilitate an NIL deal with a player. It's out of your purview. If the student athlete wants to do that on their own time, on the side, that's okay. But per NCAA regulations, a coach, an athletic program cannot help a student. Okay, and it's happening. I'm not going to lie to you, it's happening. Kind of already went through the top of page 1. Who benefits? Mostly top college athletes, but pretty much anyone from small school, middle-sized school to big schools. NIL rules in all states allow players to sign agents who will help secure endorsements, appearances, and the like. And if you're smart, you will get a reputable agent. So 5 great things about NIL, and I'm on the bottom of page 2. Number 1, charities are benefiting from NIL campaigns and donations. I think really smart athletes who know how to brand themselves are doing this pretty well. I think there's a University of Texas at Austin football player, quarterback. His name is Casey Thompson, and he donates part of his NIL money to the charity No Kid Hungry. Well, I think that's genius branding. Not only does it make the athlete look really good, but any fans of this UT player, this quarterback, they're going to donate money and the charitable organization wins. So it's a win-win, right? Number two, NIL does away with impermissible benefits. Okay, so for example, let's say you're just played a football game. You're Johnny Manziel, and Chick-fil-A wants to give you a $20 gift card. According to the NCAA, prior to the Supreme Court ruling, he couldn't even take a $20 gift card. Now, any other college student could take it. No problem. But that would be impermissible with NCAA guidelines. Here's an example. Shabazz Napier, a basketball star, stated he and his teammates went to bed hungry some nights because coaches couldn't give them more food. It would be seen as a violation if they gave them more food than the 3 meals a day their scholarship paid for. Now, you're probably going, well, what do they need 3 meals a day for? Well, if you've ever been a college athlete, and I was a high school athlete, I was captain of my track team, you're hungry all the time if you're working 40 hours a week, if you're working out 40 hours a week, and that's the average time that a student is working out. So there's just a bunch of really interesting violations. I think the most famous one, let's say you have a YouTube channel, or I don't know, a podcast that became big during the pandemic, and you go to Duke University. Well, as long as you were not a student athlete, you could profit off that. No problem. But if you were a student athlete before 2021, the NCAA would come down on you. And that's exactly what happened to Donald DeLahaye. He was a place kicker for, I'm going to make sure I get the college right, University of Central Florida. He played during the 2015-2016 season, obviously before NIL changes. And he was targeted by the NCAA because they found out he created a lucrative YouTube channel. And good for him. Isn't that what you're supposed to do in college? Like, be an entrepreneur, right? Learn a business trade. Good for him. The NCAA intervened and said, either shut down your YouTube channel or you lose your scholarship. He left the school. Okay, so what bothers me about that is this is about money, right? And he probably wasn't even making that much to begin with for it to be, that big of a deal. But remember that student athletes are often given scholarships that some of which would never have been able to afford. So you just cost somebody their education on, a violation that was probably pretty harmless. So the concern is, why do I bring that up? Well, if new limitations or new regulations and a federal law is put into place, what has been gained with NIL changes will be stripped down, right? Yeah, they'll still get NIL rights, but they'll have, restrictions upon those. So there's the concern with that. NIL creates equity between smaller and larger schools. It has been proven many times that the size or reputation of an athlete's school does not guarantee or restrict opportunities for NIL success. Fresno State basketball stars, the Cavender twins, signed NIL deals with multiple national brands in the first few weeks. Now, is this normal? Yes, if you're already pretty savvy on social media. Louisiana State University, blank on her name, Olivia Dunn, has a 7-figure NIL deal. She is a gymnast for LSU, Louisiana State University, if you don't know what LSU is. She has endorsement deals with Viore. If you've seen her commercial, she's doing back handsprings, back walkovers on the beach. American Eagle and Grubhub. Former Alabama quarterback Bryce Young used his fame to endorse a BMW dealership, Subway, Cash App. So what's fascinating is if you already have a social media following, then you have it's set up for them. They already know you have fans, so endorsement deals will come at these athletes. So the first year of NIL, when the Supreme Court ruled in favor of student athletes being able to profit, $917 million was made in the first year, most of which went to football and basketball stars. But wow, that's incredible. And I don't have the figures for the second year. So let's go to your outline here and let's kind of map this out. I'm so sorry, it kind of went dark. Get some light in. No, did that make it better? It did make it better. Okay. My light switch is over there and I don't want to get up. So here we go. Student athletes have had the right to continue to profit from their NIL without the NCAA stepping in as an enforcer, attempting to implement restrictions to circumvent the gains already made. Okay, so this is basically they held student athletes to a different standard than every other student on campus. So they were restricted. Now, are they like any other student on campus? Well, no, they were given a free education and a scholarship. However, and I say that to you, and I'm pretty sure you probably figured that out. Every other student on campus isn't working 40 hours a week at a full-time job playing sport either, are they? So it's not that simple. And this is the University of Central Florida kicker, Donald DeLahaye. And my argument here really is if the NCAA were given power to regulate how students could earn profits, this could cause one of two problems. They would be subjected to undue scrutiny like they were previous to the Supreme Court ruling, which would violate their right to promote themselves. And number two, this would impact antitrust laws. This could be a criminal violation of the NCAA to unreasonably restrain a student's access to free enterprise. And that means a lot of students could go in and sue them. So I don't know if they're worried about that. If the NCAA were to be granted the purview to enforce regulations with regard to NIL, this could hinder a student from engaging in entrepreneurial pursuits. Okay, well, why is that a big deal? Okay, so this is just an incredible, it's a little dark there, statistic. Of the 500,000 college athletes on scholarship in the nation, 98% will not go on to play sports. Whoa. 98%. This is their chance. 2% will go on to play NFL, NBA, professional sports. Okay, so your window is small. So that's a pretty staggering statistic, right? With current NIL guidelines, any student athlete can engage in creating and marketing their personal brand. So it's about fairness to a lot of these student athletes, and look at from their perspective. I don't know if you know this. If you're working out and you're playing 40 hours a week, that's wear and tear on your body. If you're a football player, that's wear and tear, that's impact on your body. And I was a runner for over 20 years. And ladies and gentlemen, I can't run anymore because of the impact to my knees and my hips. I love to run. If I could run, I would run. But at some point, the pounding, the constant working out, your body can't sustain that. Even if you're 18, 19, 20, and 21. And remember, we're playing sports at a lot younger ages, which means the wear and tear has already happened before they ever make it to college. So that's a pretty strong argument, yes. And then lastly, today's athletes have an opportunity to become entrepreneurs. Universities provide collectives. They step in to offer guidance to allow athletes to sign credible business deals. And this has improved. And, we can argue the other side, and I will. But I do think that, they are working to protect student athletes now. But those who are able to market themselves and create a strong social media profile benefit the most. They're called marketing gold. Because they're already influencers, signing them will only grow in their popularity. So besides the money, NIL benefits student athletes in allowing them to continue to pursue higher education, to continue to play a sport, to earn their education, and still run a business on the side. And that kind of leads into our second argument. So you have a student athlete working about 40 hours a week, playing a sport. And that's, by the way, a full-time job. My sister had a basketball scholarship for 2 years. So I know we never saw her. And then you have 12 hours that you have to maintain. So 4 college courses, that's 4 AP courses with a full-time job. And then you have these students learning to navigate the business world. Wouldn't that give them an advantage out there once they're done with college? Not to mention, it finances early on their life. When college athletes were given the power to market their NIL, they were not allowed to gain business experience and build educational tools they would otherwise they were also allowed, to gain business experience and build educational tools. This means they're more marketable as a future employee when they leave college. So Sedona Price was a top Oregon basketball player. She explained she had to learn to run her own business while going to school and playing basketball. And no, as I said, that's no easy task. If a student athlete is on scholarship, and they're a student athlete working a 40-hour-a-week job and full-time schedule, NIL endorsement deals can help finance their education and expenses. You know, not everyone who plays collegiate athletics comes from a rich family. Oftentimes, they are scrimping. You know, my family, when my sister went to college, we had 4 kids. My parents had 4 kids within 5 years. So bam, 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 bam. And I was the 4th. So by the time I came around, yeah, it was tough because you're financing 4 college educations back to back to back to back. Prior to NIL policy changes, student athletes were shortchanged financially. So reinforcing regulations at this point could possibly hinder the progress they've already gained. And that's going to be our argument. Other athletes share what they have learned after being given the freedom to cultivate their NIL. Emily Cole, a cross-country runner for Duke, shared how she's had to work on curating her social media. She has to balance going to class, make time to study, representing her school, as well as her personal Instagram story. She's much more careful about posting her location, her personal security, and asking permission of teammates who may be included in photos she posts. NIL affords her the opportunity to develop a unique set of skills she would otherwise never have utilized. You know, I graduated from college when I was in my 20s, and I was naive with my business degree. I had no clue what the business world was like, and it was ugly. And look what they are leaving college already knowing what to do. I mean, this is like a dual education, and most athletes are majoring in business as well. And then finally, student athletes are not only learning business acumen, they're in a position to be a philanthropist as well. And this is where I put that University of Texas Austin Longhorn quarterback, Casey Thompson. I'm going to end with Adam Fleischner of Illinois Guardians Collective, what he believes would be wrong with the NCAA right now implementing new regulations. I found it disappointing, he says, but understandable that the NCAA, as well as coaches, taking their thoughts to Congress, and they've all approached NIL in terms of trying to delineate what should not be done and what cannot be done and what must be avoided. So while everyone is rushing to reach some consensus in Congress right now, he says there's little guidance on what to do with NIL. What we should be doing, he says, is guiding these students, protecting these students with NIL, because what could be and what should be has great potential. What a great argument. The NCAA restrictions could minimize the potential for outside learning of valuable business skills, especially if students are restricted with what they can promote. All right. This concludes opponents of NCAA regulating the new NIL changes that were put in place for the last 2 years. And that concludes this class.